Hello everyone, this is Mr. Navratil here. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to create the bridge design for the laser cutter. So this is a really neat project. Essentially, all you really need to do is sketch out your design once using Onshape, and then we're going to take that file and we're going to go over to another program called Inkscape. We're going to make sure it's the correct size and make sure that we have two of the sides of your bridge. And in the lab, when that's all said and done, you're going to laser cut these pieces out of a piece of 1/8 inch plywood, and then you're going to use these struts to glue your two halves together and make a really cool looking bridge. You'll have a couple different options at that point. You can either take the bridge home, as it is a really cool thing to kind of just have on your desk or something. We also have the means of testing the bridge for its actual weight in the clean tech lab. So you'll have a choice of either keeping it or testing for weight, which eventually will end up in the bridge failing, in other words, breaking. So that will be your choice. So if we just double click here, this is my example. I'm going to show you, it might look a little complicated at first, but we're going to use a picture actually to trace over, so it's not going to be a huge deal. So this is the design that I came up with, but let's take a look at what you would do for your own. We're going to go to the Onshape dashboard. We're going to hit Create and then Document. And we're just going to call this the bridge design, and we'll hit Create. Give it a second for it to pop up. And as always, we're going to hit the sketch tool, and then we're going to click on the front plane here for our digital piece of paper. We can change our view on the view cube to the front. And the first step here is actually to add in our template. In other words, it's just a bunch of different bridge designs that you can choose from and eventually trace. So you can find that template underneath the bridge design Google Classroom assignment, and it's right here. It says bridges.jpg. So these are the ones that we can choose from. You might not have the option to actually just download it right off the rip. You're going to have to click these three little dots, hit open in a new window, wait a second, and then you should have an option to download that file. So that should go to your downloads folder. Going back to the Onshape document, then we can go ahead and hit the little arrow next to the document. We're going to hit Insert Image. Now, if you cannot see this button here where it says Import on your Chromebook, please make sure that you go up to the top and just click on Full Screen, and it should pop up for you. And we're going to hit Import. We will go to the Downloads folder and click on Bridges. Give it a second to upload. We can click on Bridges now. I'm going to click on the origin here, and I'm going to come up and click again. So anything in this picture has absolutely no effect whatsoever on what's going to go on the laser cutter. The only thing that matters is what you are drawing inside of this picture. So anywhere you draw on here is where the laser is actually going to cut. So you'll have a choice. You can pick between any of these. Please keep in mind that the rating for your bridge, if you are going to test it in the lab and see how much weight it holds before it fails, there is a formula for that. And the formula is actually the weight of your bridge versus how much weight it held up. So I can tell you just from experience that if you were to choose the K-truss bridge here and cut out all these little triangles, your bridge at the end has a lot more material left over than, let's say, like the Warren Bridge. And because of that, it kind of gets a demerit. In other words, the score isn't going to be able to go as high because your bridge weighs more. Now, that being said, can the K-truss bridge hold up enough weight to counterbalance the fact that it's heavier than the Warren Bridge? That remains to be seen. But please keep in mind your bridge score is going to be determined off of how much it holds versus how much your bridge actually weighs. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pop in here. Let's go with the Warren with verticals here. I might just actually ignore the vertical beams here, and I know it gets pretty fuzzy when you go in, but that's okay. We're just gonna trace over these things. First step is coming up and finding our line tool, and I'm simply going to just click on the outside of our bridge. Please note that I am clicking all the way on the out of the black, so I am in fact outlining this, and that's important because when we go to use the laser cutter, and also you do want to make sure that you're drawing your lines nice and straight. You can see here it kind of constrains it like that, and this one didn't match up perfectly, so I can kind of go here and then there to finish it off. You have to imagine that we're trying to cut out the insides of these, almost like a cookie cutter type deal. So when you go to trace on the inside, you need to make sure that you're giving your design enough room between each line. If they are close enough, or they're touching for that matter, the laser cutter is just going to cut it out entirely, and your bridge will not work at all. So be mindful of that. So I'm just going to go through here. Again, this is one of the simpler designs. You can certainly choose something a little bit more complicated if you'd like. But for time purposes, we kind of just going to get this through here. So I'm just tracing on the insides of the design. Now, if you wanted to be a little bit more exact and take your time, you could potentially, especially for this bridge, you could select a triangle that you drew and kind of just copy and paste it and put it inside of these areas. You would have to use the transform tool to rotate it to get it to the right spot. If you want it to be more exact, by all means, go ahead. But again, like for time's sake here, I'm just going to do these kind of freehand. But I am trying to keep everything kind of as straight as possible as well. There we go. And that should do it for the last one there. Excellent. Okay, so there's the actual bridge itself. Again, this one was very simple compared to if you were doing the double intersection or the K-truss. The only thing that we're missing still, though, is the areas in which we're going to add in our struts. And those are just going to come in the form of square holes, essentially. So to do that, we're going to come up and we're going to click on the rectangle tool. And I'm going to zoom in pretty far here because I want to get this square hole as far away from all of the other sides as possible. If your square hole is closer to these lines or it's touching, it's just going to cut all the way through and your bridge is going to fail. So make sure that you have space and room around it. Now I just kind of freehand drew a rectangle there about the size that we need. If we go to our example, we can get that exact size. The top dimension is going to be 0.108, so let's do that first. So we're going to click on dimension. So we're going to click on dimension, and we're going to click on the top here and up and out and 0.108. If your screen pops around and gets a lot larger or smaller, just be mindful that basically what just happened was that was the first dimension that we just told Onshape. It had absolutely no reference or understanding of what the size of this was compared to anything else. So if it jumped around, that's fine. Just zoom out and zoom back in. Shouldn't be an issue. Now the side of this square here, we're going to put at 0.105. 0.105. Excellent. Okay, again, you do want this away from the edges. Now, instead of going back in and drawing a square for every single one of these spaces and dimensioning it, we can simply hit the escape tool. I'm just going to deselect any of these, and we're going to zoom in, and we're just going to click and drag where the square is. And sometimes that's not going to work for us because of the picture in the background. So that's all right. So instead, we're going to click on this line. I'm going to hold Shift on my keyboard, and I'm going to select the rest of the lines. So you should be able to select all 4 of those together. They should be highlighted yellow. I'm going to hit Control C and then Control V, which essentially is copy and paste. Now you notice here's another one, but we do have to use this little square to move the square where we'd want. So again, that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go over here and confirm. I can hit Control V again and paste another one. Okay, that looks pretty good. Select it there. And we are going to continue this process for all of these. Again, I'm trying to keep these away from the edges. Control V, there's another one. Oh, that one was close. Control V. This one can be maybe more down there. Yeah. And I'm going to continue. This is very close to the edge, unfortunately. So we're going to make sure that it's spaced out. Control V. That one's better. Control V. And you're just going to go through wherever you think that you want to add a strut. There is kind of no rules for however many you want to add in. If you want to fit a whole bunch, go for it. If you want to skip one of these little nodes, that's up to you. The design of the bridge is really in your hands. And that should be our last one right there. Excellent. Okay. So there is the design for the bridge. At this point, we're actually pretty good with Onshape. We're going to use a completely different program to get it set up so that we can manipulate it on the laser cutter. So at this point, you are going to finish your sketch. You're going to come over to Sketch 1. We're going to right click and hit Export as DXF as we normally do. Please make sure that this does say DXF, and you're going to rename this the bridge design. You can hit export. At this point, that DXF file is now in your downloads folder. You will come to the Google Classroom assignment, and where it says bridge design, you're going to upload your DXF file to this Google Classroom assignment. Now, at that point, you need to access one of the laptops in the Clean Tech lab. The laptops are located in the CNC room, the furthest most back room of the lab. When you walk in to the left, there'll be a cart of all of the different laptops. I've explained this in other videos, but I'm going to explain it again. When you do take out a laptop from the cart, please note where you're taking it from. They are numbered, so therefore they're in order. And as you return that laptop, please make sure that you plug the charger back in for the next person. So I will meet you over on your Clean Tech laptop after you have exported the DXF and put this on the Google Classroom. So now we are over on Inkscape. I wanted to just give a quick example of what this might look like when we are done. This isn't set to the exact kind of hairline red, the stroke that we need, but this is just kind of what it's going to look like on the piece of plywood that we're actually going to cut out in the CTIL on the laser cutter. So to do this, you're going to obviously sign into the laptop from the CTIL lab, and once it's booted up, it might be one of those situations where it's the first time that you're logging into that laptop, and it'll take a couple minutes to do that. But when you get to the desktop, you are going to have to open a program called Inkscape. You could either find it on the desktop with this little symbol here, or you could just go to the search bar and type in Inkscape, and you'll be able to open it that way. So we're going to go ahead and hit Inkscape. Yours on the laptop might open in a way where it's asking for there's like a big dialog box in the middle, and it's gonna ask you for a whole bunch of options. You can just click on like New Document, and it will bring you to something that looks like this. So by the default setting, it's just a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper, like a piece of computer paper. So the first thing we need to do is change this background canvas to the actual size of the plywood that we're going to be cutting out of. So to do that, we're going to go up to File, and then we're going to hit Document Properties. And from here, we can kind of bring this over to the side if you want. For the size of this, we do need to change the units here from millimeters to inches. And like I said, it's set up for just a regular piece of computer paper. For us, we're going to want to make this width 12 inches, and then you can hit Enter. And then for the height, we're also going to want to change that to 12 inches and hit Enter. This is essentially the piece of plywood that we have there in the CTIL. It's a piece of 1/8 inch plywood that we're going to be cutting this out of. So that's the exact size there. So to get our design from your Google Classroom, now you took the DXF, you've uploaded it to Google Classroom, and now you are on the laptop. So you are going to find yourself on Google Classroom on the laptop. You're going to navigate to the Google Classroom assignment, and you're going to download your DXF file from that particular assignment. So we can go into the bridge design, and you're going to hit the view assignment button. You'll be able to find your DXF file and download it from there. Once it is downloaded, then we can go into Inkscape, and we need to bring that file into Inkscape. So to do that, we're going to go up into the top left here. We're going to hit File and Import. And then from there, you will go to your Downloads folder, and you will find that bridge design.dxf and hit open. Now it's going to ask you a couple different things. By default, it's going to be set to manual scale here. This is very important that you come down and you hit read from file. It's very important that you select this read from file option. We're going to hit OK and then OK again. We don't have to change any of those. And your bridge design file should come in. Now it's not technically set up to the right size yet. So we do need to change a little bit about that. First of all, we're going to come up and we're going to lock this file right here. We're going to make sure that that's locked. And all that does is it makes sure that the aspect ratio of this doesn't change in any way. And then the second thing is we're going to come over and we're going to change the unit of measurement from millimeters to inches. When you click on that, you're going to have to scroll with your mouse wheel to go up and hit inches. So it's currently set at 8.6 by 1.82 inches. Let's go ahead and change the width. We're going to change that to 11.5. You're going to hit enter and then leave whatever is left over here. Okay. And then all we have to do is start positioning this object. I'm just kind of clicking and dragging it so that it's closer to the top of the piece of plywood essentially. Now, as we're building a bridge, one of these sides isn't really going to do us much good. We need two of them, in fact, to make the bridge. So I'm going to hit Control C and Control V to make a copy. And I'm going to click and drag that copied version down. Now, it's very important, if you're thinking about this, what we're attempting to do really is create a, let's go back to, there we go. We're trying to take that piece of plywood, that 12-inch by 12-inch piece of plywood, and we're attempting to cut two bridges out of it. So if you were, for instance, your bridge is maybe a little bit taller than mine, and you were going to set it down here, if you think about it, if we were going to laser cut this out of the plywood, the next person who's going to use that piece of plywood won't be able to cut their bridge. There's just simply not enough space. So the name of the game here is taking your design and getting it as close to the top as possible. And then also the second side of it, we want to bring up without attaching to the other side. Remember, none of these lines can overlap, otherwise the laser cutter is going to cut those out, and it won't work. So if we zoom in, I'm going to hold Control on my keyboard. I'm going to use my mouse wheel. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm just going to try and get that really, really close to the top design there. So we have our bridge all set here, and at this point, what we need to do is tell the laser cutter to actually cut these lines out. At the moment, if we were to send this to the laser cutter, it would just engrave this image. It would just tell us, okay, you want to cut out like an engraving that looks like a bridge. No, we want to cut all the way through this piece of plywood. So to do that, I'm going to simply take my mouse and I'm going to select both of these designs at the same time. And I'm going to come up where it says Object, and I'm going to hit Fill and Stroke. And then this dialog box is going to open for us over on the right. I want to click on Fill. I'm going to change the fill to nothing, so this little X here. I'm going to go to Stroke Paint, and I'm going to select a flat color. And when this pops up, you want to make sure that you have RGB selected, and then we're going to click on the R value, and we're going to change it all the way to 255. That's very, very important that you do that. And then finally, you're going to come up where it says Stroke Style, and we're going to change our unit of measurement to inches, and then we are going to simply change this to 0.001. That is, again, very important that you do that. Now when you click on that, it almost makes the design completely disappear, right? It's barely visible when you zoom out. When you zoom in, you can see that there is in fact our two designs still left there. It's just that that line that's creating the designs is so thin that it is almost invisible. So at this point, we are actually ready to laser cut our project. Now you're on one of the CTIL laptops. So to get this design file to the MakerStation and then obviously towards the laser cutter, we're going to have to save it and re-upload it to the Google Classroom assignment. So to do that, we're very simply going to hit File, and we're going to come down where it says Save As. Now, what we are looking for is this Inkscape SVG file. By default, that's the file that we want. And we're going to go ahead and name this our bridge design. I'm going to hit save. That's going to go to your downloads folder on the laptop. And all you need to do is go back to the bridge design Google Classroom assignment. You're going to unsubmit your assignment from the previous DXF file. And then you're going to upload and add in the SVG file that we just downloaded. So again, file, save as SVG. I threw mine on my desktop. And again, yours will probably go to the downloads folder. And you're going to upload that SVG file to this Google Classroom assignment. Once you are ready, you can enter the Maker Room. When you get to the Maker Station, you're going to navigate yourself towards this Google Classroom assignment and download that SVG so that you can send it to the laser cutter. So that is how to create the design in Inkscape on the laptop to send to the Maker Station.
Okay, so we are now on the Maker Station, and I have the Google Classroom assignment opened up here. So as mentioned before, you're going to go to this assignment, you would hit Turned In, and you would find your name over here, and then you'd find your SVG file that you'd need to download. Once you do that, you should be able to open that file on the computer, and it will bring you to Inkscape. Now, it's really difficult to see, but my bridge design is there. Remember that those hairline red lines are very, very thin, so it's difficult to see. Now, when we are ready to send our file to the laser cutter, the first and absolute most important step, I'm going to come over here in the Maker Room, and this button needs to be pressed first. This is the exhaust system for the laser cutters. You have to turn this on for the laser cutters to even be on. This essentially just takes all of the burned air and shoots it outside so it doesn't end up in the lab. So we're going to go ahead and hit start first. You'll notice the system comes on. Your next step is to come down and find hopefully a piece of scrap plywood that we're going to be able to use for your bridge. Now there are brand new sheets down here, but the rule is we always try and use a piece of scrap first before we move on to using a brand new piece. So I can take this out, and all we're looking for is just basically a half sheet of plywood that's going to be able to fit our bridge. So let's see if we can find one real quick. So it appears that this one, whoever laser cut this, unfortunately didn't do it the right size, but it does have enough room for ours on the top, so I'm going to go ahead and use this piece. I can close up the drawer. I'm going to look at laser cutter number 1 here, and I'm going to start by just opening the lid very carefully. Now, when you open it, there might be somebody else's project in here. It's very important that you take that out. Hopefully not while the laser head is moving, and we're going to find a place for this. Now this just looks like a piece of scrap, so this can go back in the scrap bin. Sometimes it might be somebody's already completed bridge or project. There is a bin down here right above the completed 3D parts bin. If you open this bin up, it holds everybody else's projects that weren't here to grab it out of the laser. Okay, so we're going to come back over. I'm going to take my piece of wood, I'm going to put it in the laser cutter. You're going to be very, very careful that you do not hit the nozzle on the laser cutter. That is one of the most expensive parts. So we're going to slide it under. You're also going to make sure that you have your piece of wood snug against this ruler and this ruler. So we want it all the way in the corner of the laser cutter. Once you have it all set, you can then go ahead and close the lid. We're going to come back over to the Maker Station. You're going to make sure that your design is placed exactly where we want it, and you are simply going to come up and you're going to hit File and then Print. We need to make sure that we come up and we're going to select Epilogue Engraver, and we're going to hit Print. Now what this is going to do is send it to the laser cutter. No new window pops up, but if you look down here, there's this orange flashing light on this blue E. That means that the file did in fact get sent to the laser cutter. Now, this is very important. There officially is a bug. There's something wrong with sending it the first time. You'll notice that this template isn't long enough to actually fit and cut our bridge, and it's only going to cut up to here, which would be a gigantic waste of our plywood. So to fix that, you're just going to go back to your file, and you're going to hit File, Print one more time, and make sure it says Epilogue Engraver, and then hit Print. What that does, when we go back into the program, is it fixes the bug. It will go to the full 12 inches, and we can see here and here that our design is in fact going to fit on that piece of plywood. Now, I am currently selected on the machine CTIL Laser 1. If you set your plywood in the other laser, all you have to simply do is click here and click on Laser 2. And give it a second and the new camera will pop up. Obviously there's nothing in that laser, so that's not the one we're using. So I'm going to click here and go back to CTIL Laser 1, and we should be good to go. Before we hit print though, we have to make sure that there are some very important settings over on the right. The first being the autofocus. The autofocus is just a way for the laser beam to actually get to the right distance from our stock or our piece of plywood. So whenever we're doing a bridge, we are going to make sure that that says plunger. It's very important. Now we are doing a CO2 vector here, so make sure that this does say vector. And the settings for cutting all the way through a piece of plywood, we're going to set our speed to 5%. We're going to set our power to 90%, and then you can leave the rest of the settings alone. So autofocus is on plunger. We are doing a vector cut, speed on 5%, power on 90%. It's definitely not going to be cutting through anywhere else on the piece of plywood other than where we want it, and I think we're good to go. We're going to come down and we're going to hit print. Once you've hit print, you can come back over to the laser cutter we sent it to, in this case number 1. We're going to look on the top here, and you notice that there's a new file that got sent. We could have saved it as something different, but that one's just called print plywood template. But if we look very closely, you can see that we can actually view our bridge design before it's going to get cut out. So if for some reason you are on a different piece of settings here, right? So if it's on a different screen, all you need to do is come up and hit these little bars, and it will go back to the main screen where all of the files are. So we should be good to go. All we need to do simply now is go ahead and hit the play button. The laser cutter is going to start by doing its focus, and then it will start cutting out on our plywood. So we'll be back in a second to see how it looks. So we are very close to the end of the laser cut here. Once it has completed, the laser cutter will beep, letting us know that it's all set. It's actually not hot when it comes out, so you can take up the lid here. We're going to very carefully slide it out from underneath the nozzle without hitting the nozzle. So I'm going to slide it this way. Now it's at this point that we do have to clean up all of the pieces. You're going to lift this up. If there has been 2 bridges cut out of one piece of plywood, this piece of plywood and it can't really be used for anything else, so we can put that in the garbage. And now we do need to take the time to take out all of the other excess pieces of your bridge. Now, if this isn't your bridge, you can take this and put it in the completed parts bin. We're just going to set it here for a second, and we can clean these out. Once those are cleaned out, you can take your bridge design in the maker room, and you notice that one of the panels actually didn't cut all the way through, so you can kind of pop that out. Sometimes you might have to use an X-Acto knife to do that. Now it's your responsibility to find all of the bridge struts in the lab here. We're going to take one of these at a time, and we're going to use the white glue that's in the lab, and if you have difficulty finding any of these things, you could just ask Ziggy. And you're simply going to put some glue on the end, and we're going to put it inside of each of the holes that we've created, and we're going to do that for each hole, and then we can glue in the other side of our bridge, and eventually you'll end up with your full bridge design being glued together.